He grieves people who are still alive, not the ones they are, but the ones they never became. He learned early that love in his home was real, but it was not soft. It was food on the table, a roof, work, and sacrifice. Love was duty. Love was, I'd do anything for you, but never, I see you. No one taught him how to be held. No one taught him that his emotions were safe. They taught him to be good, quiet, and grateful. And he was. But something in him stayed hungry. A hunger that didn't have a name yet. As a boy, he thought he was asking for too much. He didn't want more money. He didn't want a bigger house. He wanted something much smaller. A warm voice when he came home, a hand on the shoulder, a question that wasn't a test. How are you, really? He watched other families, not perfect ones, just families where the child was allowed to be messy, allowed to cry, and allowed to be wrong. And he couldn't understand why his own home felt like a courtroom, why everything was judged, why love always came with conditions. And slowly, without anyone noticing, he began to mourn. Not loudly, but quietly, like a child swallowing tears because he knows no one will catch them. The grief didn't arrive one day like a storm. It lived in the house like dust, in the silence at the dinner table, in the way his father's eyes were always tired, in the way his mother gave everything and still looked empty, in the way affection felt embarrassing, and in the way tenderness felt like a foreign language. The grief was everywhere, but no one called it grief. They called it respect, tradition. That's just how we are. So he learned to carry it without knowing what it was, and that is how grief becomes personality. There was a moment, not a dramatic one, when it clicked. He was older, old enough to see the patterns, old enough to stop seeing his parents as monsters, and start seeing them as children. He realized something painful. They weren't withholding love because they didn't love him. They were withholding love because they didn't know how to love. No one had held them. No one had protected them. They grew up with fear, work, and survival. They grew up with rules instead of comfort. They weren't raised to be parents. They were raised to endure. And suddenly his anger got quieter. Because what do you do with anger when you finally understand? You don't become free. You become sad. That's when the grief split into two. The first grief was for them, for what they never received, for the childhoods they lost, for the softness that was stolen from them before they could even learn its name. And the second grief was for himself, for the boy he was, for the years he spent trying to earn something that should have been given freely, for the way he learned to shrink so the home could stay stable, for the way he became easy because being easy was safer than being real. He mourned the parents he never had, and he mourned the child who never got to be a child. This grief was not clean. It didn't make him noble. It made him tired. The hardest part was this. They were not evil. They were not cruel in the obvious ways. They did their best. And that made it harder. Because when someone is clearly abusive, the mind can draw a line. But when someone loves you and still wounds you, you get confused. Your heart stays loyal, and your nervous system stays trapped. He wanted to love them, and he did. But he also needed distance. He needed boundaries, and he needed a life where he could breathe without performing. And every step toward freedom felt like betrayal. Because grief in a family like his is not just sadness, it is disobedience. Over time he learned something. Grief is not only pain. Grief is also proof. Proof that he knew what love was supposed to feel like, even if he never received it. Proof that his longing was not weakness, it was intelligence. It was his heart refusing to accept a life without tenderness, and slowly, gently, he stopped asking his parents to become people they could not become, not because he gave up, but because he finally wanted peace. He stopped begging for acceptance, he stopped performing, and he stopped trying to explain his soul to people who were afraid of it. He began to do something else. He began to parent himself. He still visits them, he still calls, and he still feels guilt sometimes. Still feels anger sometimes. But the grief is no longer poison, it is a quiet companion. A reminder of what was missing, and what he now refuses to miss again. Because the greatest tragedy would not be that his parents never changed. The greatest tragedy will be if he became the same kind of silence. So he chooses softness, not as weakness, but as rebellion. And that is how he survives. That is how he lives.